Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
Today is our food unit for the month of April, and we're going to be talking about something called nuts. Okay, nuts, of course, are all over the place, and I'm not just talking about crazy people. Oh, that guy's really a nut. Stay away from him. But here we're talking about various kinds of nuts, like walnuts, almonds, pecans, stuff like that. Those are nuts that are often part of our diet. We also have peanuts, which technically aren't nuts. I think they're legumes, actually, but we still call them peanuts. And most people think of them as nuts, even though they technically aren't.
Yeah, it's true. I learned that, I think, after I moved to Taiwan, that peanuts aren't nuts. They're legumes. But we'll talk about just nuts for the next couple of lessons. We're going to go nuts for nuts. If you go nuts, you kind of go crazy about something, so it's kind of a fun title. We're going to talk about some of the different kinds that most people love and share some fascinating facts as well. I learned some things I'd never learned or heard before, so it'll be fun. But first, guys, we're going to read through today's lesson.
Craving a snack but worried about making an unhealthy choice? Why not try nuts, nature's perfect snack? These small but mighty foods are the seeds of various trees and plants. From the curved cashew to the brain-shaped walnut, each type of nut has its own unique shape and flavor that make snacking a delightful experience. Let's crack open the shell and dive into the fascinating world of nuts. The history of nuts is as rich as their taste. In fact, archaeologists have found evidence of nut consumption dating back to the Stone Age. Ancient civilizations valued nuts not just for their nutritional benefits, but also for their cultural importance. In ancient Rome, almonds were showered upon newlyweds as symbols of fertility and fortune. During medieval times, nuts became associated with prosperity, with wealthy households storing them in decorative jars and serving them during festivals. Even today, nuts continue to play important roles in cultural celebrations around the world. For instance, in China, peanuts are often given as gifts during the Lunar New Year to symbolize longevity and wealth. When it comes to nutrition, nuts truly shine as superstars of health benefits. They're packed with heart-healthy fats, protein, fiber, and essential minerals. But nuts aren't just for snacking. Their versatility in the kitchen is remarkable. They can be transformed into creamy butter, ground into flour for gluten-free baking, or turned into plant-based milk alternatives. Nuts add fantastic texture to both sweet and savory dishes, from classic pesto sauce made with pine nuts to irresistible pecan pies. So it's no wonder that health experts recommend incorporating a handful of nuts into our daily diet. Okay, so again, we're going nuts for nuts. We're going crazy for nuts. Of course, we're getting really excited about talking about nuts. This does sound rather tempting. I'd like to go out and get some nuts myself. Well, here in the first paragraph it says, craving a snack but worried about making an unhealthy choice? Well, why not try nuts, nature's perfect snack? So here we're asking a question. Are you craving a snack, but you're worried about making an unhealthy choice? Okay, so of course, lots of times we crave something. We really want to have it. We could crave, chocolate or something like that. There's lots of cravings that people have. And in this particular case, it seems like every time we crave something, it's something that isn't good for us, like a piece of cake or a piece of pie or whatever. So yes, indeed, we're afraid that we might make an unhealthy choice. Yeah, very few people crave apples or crave spinach or something like that, the things that are good for us. We usually crave something that is unhealthy.
Nuts are indeed very healthy, but they are full of fat, so they're high in calorie. So don't eat too many if you're trying to watch your weight. But they are very, very healthy, and they're a really good snack for you. There are a lot of vitamins and minerals in them. They're small, but they're mighty foods, mighty meaning strong. And they're usually seeds of various trees and plants. So we've got a sentence here that gives you a range of what they might look like. From the curved cashew to the brain-shaped walnut. So here's a range here. The cashew, of course, is very tasty, and it's curved, meaning it's not straight. It bends, so there are no straight parts to it. It's one of my favorite nuts, actually. And then you've got the brain-shaped walnut. If you've ever seen a walnut, it's very similar to what our brains and our heads look like, which is kind of funny. And it's actually good for your mental health. Actually, it is good for your brain. So each type of nut has its own unique shape and flavor that make snacking a delightful experience. So they all have their own unique taste, flavor, and some people prefer some nuts over others. My dad loved walnuts, but I prefer like pecans or cashews like my mom, which are more fattening, of course. But we're going to crack open the shell and dive into the fascinating world of nuts. If you want to crack something open, it means you make a slight break in something. It's not completely separated, but it breaks something. You can crack a mirror where you have that line that goes through the mirror. You've broken it. But we'll often say, if we're talking about detective cases, for example, oh, they cracked the case. They figured it out. So if you crack somebody or crack somebody's personality, you kind of figure out what they're like. We use it in sort of this slang way as well. But here we're going to crack open the shell. We're going to actually break it open.
Crack is a verb here. It can be used in a lot of different situations in two-word verb formations. To crack open, to crack down on something. To crack up means to go crazy, etc. But here we're cracking open the shell of a walnut or whatever. But figuratively, of course, we're going to reveal some secrets here or just give you some information about nuts and their fascinating world. Okay, here in the next paragraph it says, the history of nuts is as rich as their taste. Okay, so here we've got the word rich, which can mean a lot of things. It means you have a lot of money, of course. Everybody wants to be rich. But here, if we talk about food being rich, it has a lot of flavor, whether it's salty or whether it has a lot of fat or whatever, or whether it's very sweet. We just described the food as being very rich. Mm-hmm. And also rich just means that you have a lot of something. So the history is rich. That means there are lots of things to learn about. So yes, indeed, it's a comparative here. Their history is as rich as their taste. They're just as tasty as they are rich.
That's right. So in fact, it says, archaeologists have found evidence of nut consumption dating back to the Stone Age. An archaeologist is a scientist, and this scientist likes to study human history. They like to study ancient civilizations, and they'll often go and dig under the ground and discover like old artifacts, evidence of people and what they lived like long, long ago, and they'll study those pieces. They call them excavation sites, places where they discover ancient artifacts. It's kind of an interesting line of work. Well, they have found evidence or proof of nut consumption. Evidence is some sort of proof that something's true. It could have something to do with a police case. Maybe there was a murder and they need to find the evidence, so they look for fingerprints and blood and maybe the gun or something like that. You just are looking for facts or information that indicate whether you believe something is true, that can kind of prove what you're saying is true. Could be someone giving a witness statement, saying, I saw it with my own eyes. I know it's true. That's evidence as well. What's consumption, Tom?
That just means you're using something, you're putting it inside your body, you're eating it basically. So yes, we've got evidence or indications that people have been eating nuts for a very long time. This consumption of nuts, this eating of nuts goes back to the Stone Age, and that's a period of history. It goes back maybe 2 million years or so. That's when people were using stone and bone and things like that for tools and weapons. They didn't really know how to use metal yet, so they were still pretty primitive back in those days, but they weren't primitive enough to not eat nuts. They were actually eating them a long time ago. That makes sense. Of course, nuts are available in trees and bushes and things like that. So if you're hunter-gatherers or whatever, you certainly would have been eating lots of nuts. And ancient civilizations valued nuts not just for their nutritional benefits, but also for their cultural importance. So these different civilizations liked the nuts. They would process the nuts. They would pick them or whatever, and they would eat them because they were healthy, and you could have them as part of your daily diet. But they also had sort of cultural meanings. They actually mean something in terms of culture, the sort of symbolic of various things.
So we're going to go back to ancient Rome, where almonds, a type of nut, which is very healthy, they were showered upon newlyweds as symbols of fertility and fortune. That's interesting. So if you're a newlywed, you're someone who has just gotten married. I call people newlyweds if they're in their first year of marriage.
Right.
Yeah, I still think they're newlyweds. Fertility means the ability to produce children. And so that would be something that most couples want. They get married and they're anxious to have a family, to have children. So they would want to be fertile. Fertility is the noun form. And fortune, of course, is the ability to have wealth in your life, which is very important as well. So this was something that they would shower upon newlyweds. So picture a couple getting married, and as they walk out, instead of showering them with rice, as you see in some Western movies sometimes, they would throw nuts at them. They would throw almonds at them, and that was supposed to give them good luck.
Indeed. So that was a symbol of fertility and of fortune. Of course, almonds are xingren in Chinese. And of course, most almonds, or at least a lot of almonds, are grown in California. And of course, lots of them are exported all over the world. So yes, that's what happened in ancient Rome. And let's go to medieval times. I think that's Zhonggu Shidai. During medieval times, nuts became associated with prosperity, with wealthy households storing them in decorative jars and serving them during festivals. Okay, so of course, rich people then are like rich people nowadays. They always have these various status symbols to show off their wealth or whatever, to remind people that they're superior to everybody else. And they would have these nuts. Okay, that was a way to show off their wealth. So they would indicate their prosperity by having them in these jars, these glass jars that were decorative. Prosperity just means, hey, you're prosperous, you have a lot of money, you're making a lot of money. Like, of course, we wish everybody prosperity at Chinese New Year, you know, 恭喜发财, something like that. Everybody should prosper. That's the verb, and prosperity is the noun.
Right. So they would put the nuts in these decorative jars so that people could see what they were, and then they would use them and serve them during festivals. So this was also very popular. Even today, nuts continue to play important roles in cultural celebrations around the world. That's true. And one of the examples here, of course, would be right here in Taiwan. We're in Asia, and one of the things that are given out during the Lunar New Year to symbolize longevity and wealth would be peanuts, which I didn't understand until I moved here and went, oh, that's interesting. I've never thought of peanuts as symbolizing long life and health. So longevity is just the word we use when we're talking about living for a long time, hopefully being healthy too. So they symbolize both long life and wealth.
Right. So remember, peanuts are more seeds than they are nuts, but we still consider them nuts because we call them peanuts, and most people don't know the difference. But again, they are a symbol of prosperity and longevity, I should say, and of course of wealth. Wealth and prosperity basically mean the same thing. And yes, indeed, I don't remember receiving peanuts during Chinese New Year, but I believe they are around in some form or whatever. And of course, they do symbolize something good. Okay, that brings us to the midway point in our lesson for today. Let's take a time out and listen to our Chinese teacher now.
Hello everyone, 我是派老师，今天讲解的是4月2号 Unit 2 Going Nuts for Nuts。这个单元有2天的课文内容，介绍的是坚果。不晓得听众朋友有没有吃零食的习惯？现在健康意识抬头，很多人倡导减少摄食加工食品，多多食用原型食物。怕的是加工食品的添加物会危害身体健康，导致肥胖、疾病等问题。所以下次大家看电影 如果嘴馋，不妨用坚果替代爆米花或洋芋片。好，我们一起来看学习重点吧。请大家看到第一段第一个句子 craving a snack， 请同学注意 crave 这个动词，在这边呢就是极度渴望、极度想要的意思。好，那再来，请同学看到第三个句子 These small but mighty foods， 那这里的 foods 指的就是坚果。前面说这些坚果呢虽然小，但是 mighty 其实就是强大的意思。那后面文章的段落会让我们看到更清楚，为什么作者会说这些坚果是非常的 mighty 强大。那再来，请同学看到第五个句子，这个算是这整篇文章第一段最后一句，就是主旨句，清楚地介绍出整篇文章要让我们更进一步了解坚果。Let's crack open the shell。 那由于呢坚果多数呢都是带壳的，所以我们敲开它的外壳 and dive into the fascinating world of nuts。 请同学把 dive into 画起来，这边当然是引申的意思，而不是真的潜水，是告诉我们我们进入深入的去了解坚果的世界。好，请同学看到第二段第一个句子，这算是这个段落的主题句 The history of nuts is as rich as their taste。 好，所以我们知道整个段落要介绍的就是坚果的历史。我们知道说坚果风味非常的独特，而且呢各式各样的坚果风味非常的丰富。这里做的比喻就是坚果的历史和味道一样丰富。那再来，请同学看到第二个句子 dating back to 这个片语，请同学画起来。考古学家已经找到证据，让我们知道说其实在石器时代人类就已经开始食用坚果了。Date back to 就是回溯到什么时候。再来呢，请同学看到第三个句子，一些古文明他们之所以重视坚果是有两个原因的。第一个 nutritional benefits 营养价值，再来第二个呢就是在文化当中占有重要性 cultural importance。 那4到7个句子就充分的说明在文化方面坚果扮演什么样的角色。比方说在古罗马，那新婚夫妇呢会有人把杏仁撒在他们身上，这象征着就是生育还有财富，表示呢这对夫妻结婚以后会多子多孙，也会有很多的财富。再来，请看到第5个句子 Nuts became associated with， 请同学把 associated with 画起来，和什么有关。再来，请同学注意到后面逗点之后有个 with， 那 with 这边属于呢附带说明，就是在中古世纪的时候，大家想到坚果就会想到呢跟富庶繁荣富庶有关，所以很多有钱人的家庭家里面会把坚果放在一些装饰的瓶瓶罐罐里面。请注意这个 storing 的 ing 绝对不可以省略掉，为什么？因为前面有 with 这个介系词。那后面这个 serving 也是一样，一定要记得加 ing。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Welcome back, everybody. Again, we're going to continue talking about nuts. We're going nuts for nuts, okay? In a lot of cases, you need to crack them open with a nutcracker. I remember my grandmother had a bowl of nuts on her table whenever we went over to visit, but they were all in their shells. She had all sorts of ones. She had almonds, she had hazelnuts and stuff like that, and you needed to use this special tool called a nutcracker to crack them open. So we're also using this phrase to crack open as a way to reveal some information. Although we don't often use that in everyday conversation, it's just a clever way to sort of introduce this topic to you.
It's a great way to introduce it. I was just thinking about a piece of equipment my dad had. I guess it was a tool. It was a nutcracker, but it fit into his hand. It wasn't one of the cute nutcrackers that you see as decoration these days for Christmas. Christmas, we have a lot of nutcrackers that get set out in American homes as decoration. But my dad had this a metal device that he would use. And actually, I have it in my apartment now. My dad's gone. And he would use that to crack open those walnuts that he loved. He loved the walnuts. I never loved the walnuts as much as he did, but they're awfully healthy. But yeah, we've also used nuts a lot in our language and our culture because we've got a lot of idioms that have the word nuts in them. Like if you're nuts about somebody, you really like them. Maybe you're crazy in love with someone. Oh, he's nuts about her. If someone's a tough nut to crack, they're hard to get to know. Or maybe you have a customer who's a tough nut to crack. You can't get them to sign on for new business, that sort of thing. Of course, Tom mentioned someone's nuts. They're crazy. He's nuts. Or maybe you could be a baseball nut or a soccer nut, meaning you're a big fan. So we use nuts a lot just in our culture.
Right, and of course we mentioned some of the nuts out there. Of course we mentioned almonds and walnuts and cashews, but there are also pralines, I guess. I'm not quite sure how to say that in Chinese. Of course, we've got macadamia nuts, which we'll talk about later. And, of course, Brazil nuts, which are supposed to be really good for you.
We call them Brazilian nuts.
Oh, Brazilian nuts, okay.
Yeah.
And, of course, they are very nutritious, but they're probably expensive and hard to come by. Here in Taiwan, of course, we've got lots of nuts that are imported from other countries that you can actually get in markets in various places here. But again, we're talking about the history of nuts. Remember last time we said that nuts began to be consumed during the Stone Age. And then in Rome, of course, newlyweds would have almonds showered on them when they were walking down the aisle because those almonds symbolized fertility and fortune. And then later on in the medieval era, wealthy households or wealthy people, rich people would use them as sort of status symbols. It would represent prosperity. They would put them in those jars for decoration, and then they would serve them during festivals or during big meals or whatever. And, of course, nowadays, nuts are still pretty important. I haven't really heard this too much, but I guess in China, maybe here in Taiwan as well, peanuts have some sort of symbolic meaning during the Chinese New Year. Maybe it means long life or something like that. I've never really received peanuts here, but maybe some people do this.
Yeah, I've never been given peanuts as a gift, but I know that peanuts are a large part of the diet here in Taiwan. Some of the cuisine that we eat has lots of yummy peanuts. So when it comes to nutrition, we're going to talk about nutrition now. Nuts truly shine as superstars of health benefits. That is the truth. Now, nutrition is just the process of giving your body what it needs to continue growing and being healthy. It could be vitamins, minerals, fats, protein. You don't need carbs to live, but we love to eat our carbs, don't we? But what is it about nuts that make them so healthy? We're going to find out.
Well, first of all, they're packed with heart-healthy fats. Okay, of course, fat, generally speaking, is something that makes you fat, or at least it's in your diet. And, of course, lots of times people tell us that we shouldn't have too much fat in our diet. But if we're talking about different kinds of fat with different chemical equations or whatever, foundations or whatever, then we use the countable noun here, fats. And these particular fats, these kinds of fat, are healthy for the heart. They help your heart so that you can live a long time. So yes, indeed, please know which nuts can help your heart. And they also have protein, which of course is necessary for building muscles. We've got fiber as well, which helps your body digest food. And then we've got various minerals, which could be iron, zinc, and things like that. Things that come out of the ground, those are minerals.
Minerals are inorganic, so they're not something that just grow. We get them out of the ground usually, but we've got things like iron, zinc. Those things are really important for our bodies to repair and be healthy. So these nuts aren't just for snacking. You can eat them and feel like you're giving your body some good nutrition at the same time. Their versatility in the kitchen is remarkable. If something's versatile, that's the adjective form. It means that it has multiple uses or multiple effects. Versatility is the noun form. So they've got a lot of versatility in the kitchen. For example, they can be transformed into creamy butter. Ooh, I know something that's really popular right now, especially for foodies or people who are looking to improve their nutrition, is almond butter or nut butters. Those are much better for you than, say, margarine, which is horrible. You can grind them into flour. Ground is the past tense. So if you grind something, you make it, you crush it until it's almost a powder, right? So you can grind coffee beans. Here, we're going to grind them into flour. So they're ground, past tense, ground into flour for gluten-free baking. Or sometimes people turn them into plant-based milk alternatives. Like almond milk is kind of popular right now for people who don't want to drink milk from cows. So nuts add fantastic texture to both sweet and savory dishes. I know nuts are really popular here in Chinese cooking. That's for sure. I enjoy them. I know one of my favorite dishes is the sweet and sour pork or chicken, and they often put nuts in there. So that's often really, really tasty. Sweet, of course, you know what that means. Savory means it has more of a salty flavor to it. So all of these things are different uses or versatile uses of the nut in the kitchen.
Yeah, of course, there's peanut butter. That's probably the most kind of nut butter there is, the most common kind. But they usually add tons of sugar to it, so be careful there. And yes, of course, we've got various different substitutes, as you said, almond butter. And of course, you can add these different kinds of nuts to dishes to make them sweet, to make them savory. And then we've got this thing called pesto sauce, which is good for Italian dishes. It's a sauce made with pine nuts along with the olive oil and some other ingredients. No tomatoes. I don't think there are any tomatoes in pesto sauce. So if you go to your pasta restaurant, you probably have the choice of pesto sauce.
It's a green sauce.
It's kind of a green sauce, indeed. And we have nuts from pine trees in this particular dish. And also we've got these pecan pies. A pecan is a kind of nut from the southern United States. And, of course, it's very popular in pies. You probably can use it in other places, too. But when I see the word pecan or whatever, it's pronounced different ways depending on where you're from. This, to me, usually symbolizes a pecan pie, which tends to be very, very sweet.
Yeah, it's got a lot of sugar. I think they'd hate it here, Tom. So it's no wonder that health experts recommend incorporating a handful of nuts into our daily diet. Don't overdo it. A handful a day is probably as much as you should be putting in because they are fattening. But if you incorporate something into something else, you put it or take it and add it to something as a whole. So you have something originally and then you put something else in. As you put it in, you're incorporating it into something new. So that's a little bit about nuts. We've got another day to share with you more about nuts and why we go nuts for nuts. But right now, we're going to listen one more time to our Chinese teacher.
好，我们看第3个段落，请同学看到第一个句子。这边讲到营养价值，坚果的营养价值的时候，作者把它们比喻成就是 superstars， 算是超级巨星哦。那意思就是坚果的营养价值相当的高。2到6个句子等于是进一步的说明它们的营养价值在哪里。首先，第2个句子说到 they're packed with， 请同学把比 packed with 画起来，就表示坚果是富含有对心脏有益的脂肪、蛋白质、纤维等。好，那再来呢，请同学看到第3个句子。那其实坚果呢，并不是只是可以拿来当做点心吃而已。在厨房当中用途是非常多的，我们请同学看到 versatility， 那来自于 versatile 这个形容词，那表示呢坚果的用途非常的多元。再来请同学看到第4个句子 they can be transformed into， 请同学把 transformed into 画起来，就可以转变成。所以我们可以拿坚果把它做成什么东西，奶油状的坚果酱等等。好，那再来，请同学呢看到最后一个句子了。Health experts recommend。好，我们知道呢，有很多的这些营养专家，他们做了一些建议，是跟坚果的食用有关的。因为坚果的营养价值非常的高，所以呢，营养专家建议我们每天都可以摄取一点坚果 ，a handful of nuts， 不要吃的太多哦，那适量就好。Incorporate 什么东西 into 另外一个东西，那就是把这样东西纳入其中。好，以上就是我们针对坚果这篇文章所做的中文讲解，谢谢。
That's it for today, everybody, but there are so many things we can say about nuts that we're going to continue talking about them in our next program. Please join us then. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.